What's up, y'all? Roy here, and you're listening to Clemens with a Z podcast. So, the other day, I'm riding my bike to a music festival, the oceanfront. It's loud, it's packed. And before I even make it to the stage, I roll right into a pride parade. There's rainbow flags, music blasting, people dancing, chanting, hugging, laughing. A lot of ways, it's joy that I feel is earned. It's loud, it's beautiful, it's necessary. I find myself pulling over and just watching. And right then I feel something weird kind of rise up in me. It's not judgment at all. It's just hesitation. Because I know I'm about to record an episode that's going to go live during this month, Pride Month. But I'm thinking, who am I to say anything about this? I'm not a member of this community. I haven't lived their story. So what gives me the right to speak? And deeper than that, I'm thinking, am I just doing this to be seen, to check a box, to say I did my allyship thing? And that's the fear that this becomes about me, that I unintentionally center myself in a story that I was never meant to lead. But the thing I'm thinking about is that, I'm not telling the story. I'm telling my story, not the spotlight, to confess not what I've been, but where I've been standing. Because the truth is, I've been a part of the silence. I've been part of a product of a system that has taught me to look away. And I think I've been trying over time to unlearn all of that. So, no, I don't speak for the LGBTQIA plus community, but I am a part of this larger story because I've been shaped by the culture that's fought against them. And because now, as a grown man trying to be better, trying to love better, I want to be someone who doesn't look away anymore. And I've been thinking about how wild it is that we need parades like this, that people have to wave flags and chant and celebrate just to say, hey, I deserve to be here. I deserve to be safe. I deserve love. And I know there are people who mock that or roll their eyes or throw Bible verses at it. But at the core, I don't think it's that complicated. Because what I see is humans wanting love, humans wanting to be seen and supported. And that doesn't feel very radical. It's not political. It's just human. And that's what I want this episode to be about. Not a mic drop, not a theology debate. Just one person, me, telling the truth about how I grew up, what I've seen, and how I've changed. Because the shouting on both sides is loud. And maybe what we need right now isn't more noise, it's more people willing to sit in the tension, to wonder out loud, to speak with humility, not certainty. So that's what this is. Not a spotlight, just a story. Not an answer, just a step. So, yeah, after the parade, got home, sat with everything. And here I am hitting record. Because I've never really talked about pride with LGBTQIA plus community issues on this podcast before. And to be honest, I've hesitated. I'm a white, heterosexual man who grew up in a religious environment that had a lot of opinions about this stuff. And even though I've walked away from so much of that, there's still this weight that I carry of wondering, is this mine to even talk about? And yet, this podcast has never been about being the authority on anything. It's about naming what's real. It's about wrestling with questions out loud. It's about sitting in the tension. So that's what I'm doing today. Not because I need to prove anything, not because the algorithm told me to, but because I believe that we're all a part of this story in one way or another. And silence, especially from people who've been complicit in harm, even unintentionally, isn't neutral, it's part of the problem. So maybe this episode is more about me throwing my hat in the ring. Maybe it's just me saying, I see it now and I want to do better. I've seen things, I've felt things, and want to talk about them honestly, not as someone with answers, but as someone still unlearning, still shifting, and still healing. And when I think back, I didn't really grow up knowing anyone from that community, at least not openly, not in a way where it felt safe to ask questions or understand anything. The topic just kind of floated here, vague and loaded, like something you weren't supposed to say out loud. Most of what I've learned came from two places: church and TV. I can remember the Real World season with Pedro, um, or the Ellen DeGeneres show, those two things. And not much of it gave me, from what I'm seeing, gave me anything grounded or human. Well, I mean, the Real World season gave me something more because Pedro was being open and living his life fully. But I just didn't know, like, I didn't have words for it or naming what I was seeing. There was just that part of me just confused. In church, being gay was treated like the worst thing imaginable. Not just wrong, disgusting. A sin so heavy, so twisted, it didn't even get named in full. And on TV, most of it was played for laughs, punchlines, something to mock. So between the pulpit and the punchline, I absorbed a lot of tension without really ever understanding the people it was aimed at. I can remember one friend who lived with his grandmother, and I learned that his mom was a lesbian. I don't remember if he didn't live with her because of that or if there were other things going on, but I do remember the silence around it. Like, no one really explained it. To us, it was just out there, undefined. One time I was at his birthday party and his mom was there with her girlfriend. And the tension in the place was so thick you could kind of feel it in your chest, even as an 11 or 12-year-old boy. And no one really said anything hateful, but no one said anything, which somehow seems just as loud. And as a kid, I didn't understand it. I just knew this was something we don't talk about. And then there was this worship leader in our church, this really kind, talented man who led singing and directed our choir. And I always loved when he was on stage. But I remember noticing that he was different. He didn't carry himself like the other men in church. He was more expressive, more gentle, just himself. And one day I asked my dad why he wasn't married, and I got a vague answer, something about his lifestyle. And that was the word people used: lifestyle. They never said the word gay. They never said anything out loud, but you knew what they were saying without them having to say it. And looking back, I don't even know if he was gay, but the way the adults around me treated the possibility of it taught me everything. It taught me that even if you were loved, even if you served, even if you brought joy, your identity still made you suspect. Your wholeness had to stay in the shadows. And then there was this Bible study moment when I've talked about it on the podcast before, but it's one of those things that still never left me. It was during my sin study, and I casually mentioned noticing another man in like an attractive way. Not even a dramatic, just something I remembered, a passing feeling I had as a teenager. And when I mentioned that, the guy leading the study, his whole energy shifted. Said there were kind of like alarm bells going off. That's what it felt like. He sat up straight, eyes got wide. Wait, what do you mean? He said, was this a one-time thing? Is this something that you struggle with? And I could remember shrinking in my seat. Not really because I was ashamed of what I said, but because I could feel the shame in his voice. And in that moment, I made a decision. Just don't go there. Don't explore, don't name, don't risk being that guy. Because even naming it made the room feel unsafe. And it's wild now saying all this out loud. But I remember at one point even thinking this thing like, what if I catch it? And what do I mean by that? It was like being around someone who was gay might somehow rub off on me. That if I didn't keep enough distance, it would get into me. And this is kind of embarrassing to admit, but that's kind of the world that I came from. That was the fear that they planted. That it wasn't really about sin, it was about control. I believe it was about policing the lines of masculinity of faith, and of identity. And it was about keeping people in boxes so that no one got too free. And as a kid, and even in campus and college, I didn't have the language to push back. I just internalized the tension, the hush, the coded language, the way queerness was treated as the worst possible thing someone could be or do. Even if I didn't believe it fully, I breathed it in. And it took me a long time to realize that the problem wasn't people being gay. The problem was the fear that taught me to fear them. Does that make sense? And then there's this other layer that I want to talk about and name here. Something that I don't know if I fully understood it until much, much later. Growing up in these all male spaces, youth groups, church retreats, summer camps, locker rooms, there was always this energy, this weird undercurrent. I don't know what else to call it except buried homoeroticism. You'd hear these little jokes, snide comments wrapped in this locker room laughter, guys slapping each other's asses, joking about being gay for a second, daring each other to do weird stuff, but always with a laugh, always with a wink. And then it was normal, it was fine. Just boys being boys. But I remember this one summer at camp, there was this thing called a shower club. Basically, people would walk together naked to the bathhouse, brush their teeth, shower in open stalls. And I remember being like, why would they be doing this? It wasn't framed as anything inappropriate, it was just funny. But if you didn't laugh along, if you didn't get the joke, you were the weird one. And that's the thing. It's like this bizarre double standard. Like straight guys could flirt with the edge of queerness as long as it was wrapped in humor. But if someone was actually gay, or even if someone wondered about it, that was shut down hard. That was when the shame kicked in, the panic, the judgment. It's like the culture made space for performance, but not for truth. And the more I think about it, the more I realize just how twisted that whole setup was. Because I was raised in purity culture. I was taught that closeness with women outside of marriage, especially emotional closeness, was very dangerous, a tempting spiritual liability. So women had to be kept at a distance. Guard your heart, don't lead her on, don't let her lead you on, don't let your mind go there. But with men, I could hug them, wrestle with them, sleep 6 inches from them on a field trip mission floor, joke about sex, walk around naked in front of them at camp. That was safe. And looking back, it's just weird. Weird because it created this framework where the only people I was allowed to be intimate with were other men. But even the intimacy had to be disguised as competition or comedy. There was no space to say, I care about you. I feel close to you. I trust you. Nope, that was too much. That was suspect. What I learned without anyone saying it out loud was this: real intimacy is off limits unless it's hidden, unless it's joked about, unless it's with the right people in the right context. And I think that's part of the confusion that so many of us carry. Because even when queerness wasn't named, it was always there, in the jokes, in the fear, in the rituals no one explained. And we were never given tools to process any of it. Just silence, shame, and laugh it off and move on. And I want to say this, because it matters. Eventually, the shower club got found out. The camp director and the head boys counselor heard about it, and they shut it down fast. No drama, no sermon, just clear, decisive, no, this isn't okay. And looking back, I'm grateful for that because it showed me that leaders were paying attention. Not that everyone was asleep at the wheel, that there were people willing to step in when things crossed a line, whether it was framed as a joke or not. And in a world where so much got brushed off or ignored, that moment does stand out, and I think it deserved to be named too. It wasn't really until I got older, after high school, that I started actually knowing people in the LGBTQ community. Like, for real, not through gossip, not through warnings, but face to face, conversations, laughter, real human moments. I can remember working at a grocery store and there was a gay couple who worked there. They were kind, hilarious, and grounded, always friendly to me, always kind, always talking. I can remember one day sitting at lunch. I was eyeing their meal. It looked amazing, and without hesitation, one of them just slid his plate toward me like, "Here, try some." Just kindness. No agenda, no weirdness, just generosity and presence. And I can remember thinking like looking at them doesn't feel like sin. It doesn't feel like rebellion or corruption or whatever else I was taught. It just felt like humanity. And that moment stuck with me, that small moment, because it wasn't big or dramatic, because it was normal. And more, the older I got, the more I experienced moments like that at work, in friendships, even just in public spaces. And the more of that, I started to feel this slow internal shift. Like my heart and my gut were whispering, "You've been taught something that's not true." And it's wild to admit, but I remember even having this thought as a younger person. I know I said this before, earlier in this about catching it. Like being around gay people might somehow make me gay, like it was contagious. And I know it's embarrassing. But yet with every real relationship I formed, it would slowly start to undo that fear, not through arguments or debates, but through people showing up, being themselves, and treating me with kindness, humor, and dignity. And I started to realize the people I've been told to be afraid of were some of the most generous, grounded, honest, real people I've ever met. And that's one of the biggest shifts for me that has come from just doing life alongside people. There's a couple that's very close friends of ours, a lesbian couple. They've got 3 kids. We vacation together. We hang out at each other's houses. They're just part of our life, and it's so normal. And not normal in this performative, like, look at how normal they are or what we're doing, just genuinely wonderfully normal. They're raising kids, juggling work, helping with school projects, managing the chaos of parenting, trying like the rest of us to raise good humans and stay afloat. And I'll be honest that even as I'm talking about them now, I feel this weird hug in my gut, like I'm running down a checklist, like I'm saying, "See, hey, I'm not homophobic. I have a gay friend." And that makes me cringe a little because I know what that sounds like. I've heard it before and I don't want to be that guy. It reminds me of the way white people sometimes say, "I'm not racist. I've got a black friend." It's that same dynamic, trying to distance yourself from discomfort by pointing to your proximity to someone else's identity. And I really hate that because what I hope that people are getting from this is it's not about proving anything. This isn't about scoring points. I'm just trying to tell the truth about naming what I've seen and how it's changed me, and about realizing how often people like me, people with privilege, people raised in systems of certainty, make other people's lives about our own journey of unlearning. So, no, I'm not saying this to prove I'm a good ally. I'm not saying it because it's a part of the story. I'm just saying it because it is a part of the story. Because seeing these people and these families, watching how they love their kids, support their kids' friends, how they just exist with honesty, strength, and joy, that has shaped me in ways that I didn't expect. And I want to keep being shaped. I want to stay soft. I want to keep learning how to love better. And I want to tell the truth about the journey, even the parts that make me feel uncomfortable. And it's one thing for your beliefs to shift because of your own life, but it's something else entirely when you see it happening in kids. Now, I've worked with teenagers, elementary schoolers, I've sat in small groups, youth groups, classrooms, summer camps, and I've watched kids time after time slowly figure out that something about them isn't welcomed. You can see it in their eyes, the way they hesitate before speaking, the way their shoulders shrink in when they realize they're being watched, the little signs of self-editing, the coded language, and the silence. And it always wrecks me because you can tell they knew. even the ones that didn't have the words yet. They could feel that who they were becoming might get them in trouble, might get them excluded, might make the people they look up to disappointed. And that's one of the reasons why I just couldn't keep showing up in church spaces that allowed that. I couldn't be a quote unquote safe adult in a system that wasn't actually safe. I couldn't look a kid in the eye and pretend it was all okay when I knew deep down that if they told the truth about themselves, it wouldn't be. And I did my best and tried hard to be the person that they felt safe to talk to, but it just became too much. And it's one of the ways I had to step away from working with teens in the church because I couldn't play both sides. I couldn't tell them they were loved while standing inside a structure that turned their identity into a debate topic. And if your theology can't hold the full humanity of a kid, of who they are and who they're becoming, then I think your theology is way too small. And if your church makes a child feel unsafe in their own skin, then that church is failing at the most basic call to love. That's the line for me, and that's where the table flips. And so here's the truth, at least for me, my truth, is I just don't care. And I don't mean that in a cold or detached way. I mean, I don't care that someone is gay or lesbian or trans or queer. It doesn't bother me, and I don't know if it ever really did. But what I do care about is whether people get to live full, honest lives, whether they feel safe, whether they get to love and be loved, whether they can show up as themselves and not be treated like a problem to be fixed. Like, that's the kind of caring I'm interested in. And so I hear people all the time arguing. You hear this all the time. The same-sex marriage is a mockery of traditional marriage. And I can't help but shake my head. Because honestly, like, that's such a small, scared way to see the world. Like, how does two men or two women getting married make my marriage to my wife any less sacred? Like, how fragile is your understanding of love if someone else's joy threatens it? I've met people in this community. I've laughed with them, cried with them, watched them raise their kids, grieve losses, build lives, and never once have thought this feels wrong. What I've thought is this is human, this is beautiful, and this is real. And what does feel wrong is the way certain people twist the Bible into a weapon, taking words that weren't even in the original texts, shoving them into modern translations just to justify their discomfort, trying to frame love as sin because it doesn't fit their framework. That's not theology. That's control. That's people trying to hold power over others under the guise of quote unquote truth. And honestly, if there is a divine creator, if there is this God who made all of us, then I just can't believe that God makes mistakes like this. I can't believe that someone's queerness is some kind of glitch. I can't believe that the way someone was created to love is a cosmic error. And that's the part of this that's so crazy to me and drives me crazy about what we're arguing about. Because with all the brokenness in the world, kids going hungry, people dying without health care, schools crumbling, families living in fear, like, this is what Christians want to fight over? This? Like, this is the hill they want to die on? Not justice, not compassion, not healing, but who someone loves? Come on. This conversation gets presented as complicated, but it's not. Not to me, not anymore. Like, these are people, like, full stop. They deserve joy, they deserve safety, they deserve celebration just as much as we do. And the fact that we have to debate this shows how deeply we've lost the plot. Because this isn't where the battle should be. This isn't even a battlefield. It's a picnic, a dance floor, a neighborhood cookout, and we're acting like it's a frickin' war zone. And the more I think about it, the more reason I've felt a version of that. Not the same, not as dangerous, not as costly, but real enough to leave scars. Because when I was in the church, I couldn't be myself either. I couldn't shine in the way I wanted to shine. I couldn't explore what felt natural or honest or joyful. So instead, I just kept shaping myself in who I thought I was supposed to be. I was told a good Christian man should look like, what I was told leadership looked like, and what God expected of me. And every time I felt something stir in me, something creative, something soft, something bold, something me, I clipped my own wings. I didn't even need someone else to do it. I just learned how to do it myself. And I was talking to someone recently on a podcast, a woman who had been on or through her own painful journey in the church, and she said something that still is a part of this. She said, it was like I kept clipping my own wings. And I thought, yeah, the same, over and over. Trimmed down, toned down, made acceptable. So when I see someone from the LGBTQIA plus community standing tall, speaking truth, living free, even if it makes others uncomfortable, I get it. On some small little level, I get it. Even if our stories are different. Because there's something sacred about stepping into who you are, finally. Something revolutionary about saying, this is me, and I'm not going to apologize for existing. And then I think about the history in this community. Things about Stonewall, Matthew Shepard, the AIDS epidemic, countless lives lost, silenced for just being honest. It's wild to me that there are still churches, again, that think this is the hill to die on. I can't ignore the cost of that. And I have to name the history because I've never had to carry that kind of fear. No one's tried to legislate my straightness. No one's tried to pry it away or pray it away. No one's threatened my safety because of it, because of who I love. And that's not true for everyone. You've got Stonewall in 1969. It was a riot, not a rainbow. There was a rebellion led by queer people, trans women, drag queens, gay men against police violence and institutional shame. That's the root of pride. Not a party, not a brand, but survival. And then in 1998 came Matthew Shepard. And I think I remember this the most because I was a junior in high school at the time. He was tied to a fence, tortured, left to die because he was gay. His death wasn't just this one-off thing. It was a flashpoint in a long history of violence. And even putting myself back in that shoes, I just didn't understand why someone could do that. I didn't name it, didn't say it out loud, but it was there inside me. That feeling of just because he was gay, this is what they did. It's wild. And we cannot talk about this history, without naming the AIDS epidemic, because that was more of a virus. It was a cultural crucifixion. It wasn't just that people were dying. It was that they were dying while the world looked away. Churches said it was God's punishment. People still say that. Politicians refuse to say the word. Medical institutions dragged their feet. Families buried loved ones in secret. Entire communities wiped out. And entire generation of joy, talent, and tenderness gone. I think about that scene in the show Tales of the City, where this man looks through his old black book from that time in the 80s, scanning all the names that he's crossed out. Each one is a friend who died, each one a loss that no one outside the community wanted to grieve. And that's part of the story, too. That's a part of the trauma that still echoes in all of these elders. And that's a part of why I believe pride exists, not because it's easy to be loud, but because silence has killed people. So, yeah, I look at all of that, all of this, and I think about how people are still trying to make this queerness into some sort of rebellion against God. But it's not a rebellion. It's resilience. It's courage. It's survival. And it's love. And if we call ourselves people of faith, or at least people of decency, or even people who want to do right by our neighbors, then we have to honor that. This isn't a fight I want to have. This isn't a hill I want to die on. And frankly, I think it should have ever been one to begin with. So I think maybe I'm standing on a different hill that I'm planting my flag in, saying they deserve to be here. They deserve to live, to love, to be themselves fully. Like that to me feels like a good thing. That feels like something I can fight for. That feels like something that I can say, you know? And I know this might have been a different kind of episode, heavier maybe, maybe more vulnerable than usual. And I want to end by saying this, that I don't think I've said everything perfectly. I'm not even sure I can. Because again, this isn't about being right. I'm just trying to be honest. I'm not a theologian. I'm not a historian. I'm just a guy who grew up in a world who taught me to fear certain people and then have spent the second half of my life realizing those fears were never mine to carry. And I still have more to unlearn. I still catch myself hesitating, wondering if I've said too much or not enough. But I believe that silence isn't neutrality, and empathy without courage does not do much good. And if you stuck with me this far, thank you. Not because I need applause, but because I believe that conversations like this matter. And if you're wrestling with this stuff too, whether you've shifted your beliefs or you're still trying to make sense of it all, I get it. I truly do. All I ask is that you stay open, not to an argument, but to a person, not to a position, but to a story. Because people are not issues to be solved. They're humans to be known and loved and protected. So wherever you are on this journey, thanks for listening. Thanks for sitting with the tension in this messy middle. Thanks for letting me tell the truth the best way I know how. So thank you for listening to this episode of Clemens with a Z. I'm really grateful that you're here in this conversation in this story. If something in this episode resonated, challenged you, or made you pause, I'd love to hear from you. You can reach out to me via email at clemenswithaz.com. Or you can find me on Instagram at Clemens with a Z podcast, or shoot me a message through the website, DM me, whatever. If you want to go deeper in some of these issues and themes, I also write over at Substack at clemenswithaz.substack.com. That's where I unpack more of these reflections, faith, healing, church stuff, and all this messy middle in between. And what truly helps is if you rate, review, like, and subscribe. That helps more people find these stories. If you want to support the podcast, you can head over to clemenswithaz.com. You can buy a mug, a shirt, sticker, anything cool. You can also find the link in the show notes to the GoFundMe. But honestly, I just hope this gave something with you to wrestle with. Because the goal isn't to land in certainty, it's to stay open, to stay human, and to stay in it. So, all right, see you next time. Take care of yourself, take care of each other. Don't be afraid of the tension. Keep asking better questions. Peace.